Imagine a pilot standing in the cockpit, mid-flight, looking straight at the instrument panel and saying, "I don't track altitude." Now ask yourself, would you stay in that seat or would you start looking for an exit? Because that's not fiction, that's testimony. And the man saying it is Kash Patel. This is not a normal hearing. This is a moment where authority separates itself from awareness, where decisions are made but ownership quietly disappears. Inside a congressional exchange, Congressman Steve Cohen asks a direct question. Why were at least 12 agents working in Iran counterintelligence terminated at a time of escalating threat? Patel doesn't deny the firings. He doesn't explain the timing. He reframes the premise. I don't work on timelines. Let that sit. Not I disagree. Not that's incorrect. But I don't work on timelines. And when pressed further, were they experts on Iran? Did they work in counterintelligence? The answers don't sharpen. They dissolve. I'm not familiar. I don't believe so. So here's the frame we're working with. What? The director of the FBI confirms the decision, but not the details. Owns the authority, but not the knowledge. And the question is no longer what happened. The question is, how much of this system is now operating exactly like that cockpit? And this is where the hearing stops sounding like oversight and starts sounding like exposure. Because when Congressman Steve Cohen narrows the question, he doesn't escalate his tone. He tightens the logic. These were counterintelligence agents. These were Iran-focused personnel. These were not random dismissals. So again, why now? And again, Kash Patel doesn't answer the why. He shifts to the how. Internal investigations, ethical standards, violations. But notice what just happened. The timeline disappears. The context disappears. The threat environment disappears. All that remains is a vague justification that cannot be tested in real time. So Cohen does what any prosecutor would do. He introduces a specific trigger. Were these ethical violations connected to the classified documents found in a bathroom at Mar-a-Lago? Now watch the shift. Because this time, Patel doesn't say, "I'm not familiar." He doesn't say, "I don't believe so." He says, "pending litigation." That's not an answer. That's a shield. And it tells you something critical. When the question is broad, he minimizes. When the question is precise, he retreats. This is not confusion. This is pattern behavior. And while this exchange is happening, the numbers don't pause. A 43% increase in counter-espionage arrests tied to Iran. Hundreds, over 360, ongoing investigations linked to Iranian threats. So let's stack the facts. Threat level rising, investigations expanding, and the response says to remove the specialists closest to that threat, not replace, not redeploy, remove. At some point, this stops being a personnel decision and starts looking like a structural contradiction. And this is the point where the hearing crosses a line from explanation into exposure, from policy into contradiction that no longer hides behind language. Because once you stack the facts side by side, the logic doesn't just weaken, it collapses under its own weight. On one side, you have a confirmed escalation, Iran-linked activity rising, counter-espionage arrests up 43%, more than 360 active investigations connected to Iranian networks still ongoing. On the other side, you have a decision. Remove at least 12 agents from a counterintelligence unit focused on that exact threat. Not a reduction in threat, a reduction in expertise. So the question is no longer, why did you fire them? The question becomes, what replaces the gap they leave behind? And here's where the system begins to show its fault lines. Because when officials are asked about the Strait of Hormuz, the single most critical choke point for global energy flow, the answer is clear. Yes, Iran still has the capability to disrupt it. Missiles, mines, fast boats, not hypothetical, not theoretical, still active capability. And when asked how long that disruption could last, the answer isn't reassuring. It's incomplete. We'd need an updated assessment. So let's slow that down. A known threat, a known choke point, a known global consequence, and no confirmed timeline of impact. Now push it further. Was there an analysis of what a conflict would do to global supply chains? Oil prices? Economic stability? The answer drifts. Department of Energy, Treasury, somewhere else, not here. And then comes the question that should never be uncertain. Was the president fully briefed on those risks? I believe so, but I can't confirm. That's not a gap, that's a fracture. Because national security doesn't operate on belief, it operates on confirmation. And yet here we are, with the director unfamiliar, the intelligence fragmented, and the chain of awareness unverified. This is where prosecutorial logic locks in. If the threat is real, and it is, if the investigations are active, and they are, if the economic consequences are measurable, and they are, then removing specialized personnel at that exact moment is not neutral. It has direction, it has impact, and it creates risk. Not abstract risk. Operational risk, because intelligence isn't just data, it's continuity. It's the accumulation of years of context, relationships, pattern recognition that cannot be replaced overnight. When you remove the people who carry that continuity, you don't just lose headcount, you lose memory. And without memory, every threat looks new, even when it isn't. Now layer one more contradiction on top. Patel insists the intelligence community is not involved in operational planning, boots on the ground, deployment decisions, military movement. Fine, but if they're not responsible for action, then they are responsible for awareness. And what we are hearing is not awareness, it's distance. Distance from timelines, distance from personnel knowledge, distance from confirmation at the highest level. So what exactly is left? A system that speaks in confidence, but cannot verify. A leadership structure that makes decisions, but cannot explain proximity to facts. And a national security posture that feels less like coordination and more like compartments, sealed off just enough that no single answer ever fully connects. And this is where the hearing stops being about officials and starts being about consequences that don't sit in a hearing room. Because when expertise is removed, when timelines are dismissed, when confirmation turns into "I believe so," the impact doesn't stay inside classified briefings. It moves outward, into real systems, real economies, real lives. Picture it clearly. A disruption in the Strait of Hormuz doesn't read like a memo. It shows up as fuel prices rising overnight, shipping delays stacking across ports, supply chains tightening like a vice. It shows up in grocery bills, in transport costs, in decisions made by families who will never hear the words "pending litigation," but will live with the results of it. And that's the moral line this moment crosses. On one side, authority that can say, "I'm not familiar." On the other, a public that has no choice but to absorb the outcome of that unfamiliarity. This is not about party. This is not about optics. This is about whether a system built on precision can function when its leadership detaches from it. Because if timelines don't matter, if expertise is optional, if answers can dissolve into process whenever they get too specific, then what exactly enforces the standard? And if no one can confirm who knew what and when, then who is accountable when it fails? So here's the question you're left with. Not as a viewer, but as someone inside the system this affects. Do you trust a structure where decisions are certain, but understanding is not? If this moment matters to you, if clarity matters more than comfort, then don't just watch it pass. Like the video, comment your take, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe, because moments like this don't end here.